Let's be honest. When someone disrespects you, your first instinct might be to snap back, give them a piece of your mind, maybe even draft an emotional TED talk in your head just to prove your point. But here's the truth most people don't want to hear. The loudest revenge is silence, not the passive kind, but the calculated soul-shaking kind that makes them sit with their own actions. You see, real power isn't about reacting, it's about removing. Your time, your presence, your access. When you stop explaining yourself, stop chasing clarity, stop giving them the emotional stage, they start feeling that void, and oh, it burns. Today, I'm going to show you 5 silent moves that don't just protect your peace. They haunt the people who disrespected you. These aren't about being petty. They're about being untouchable. If you're tired of people treating your kindness like a weakness, subscribe and drop a comment that says, "I choose silence over chaos." Because trust me, nothing teaches a lesson like your absence where your presence used to be. Let's begin. The power of silent withdrawal. There's something eerie about the silence that follows a boundary you never announced out loud. I remember my uncle, let's call him Sam. A man who never raised his voice, but always knew how to belittle people without using a single harsh word. Every family dinner, he'd throw jabs masked as jokes. When I finally decided I'd had enough, I didn't confront him. I didn't argue. I didn't draft the perfect comeback in my head. I just stopped showing up. No calls, no explanations, just absence. A month later, my cousin texted me, "Uncle Sam keeps asking where you've been. He thinks something's wrong." And there it was. That quiet confusion, the beginning of his discomfort. Not because I insulted him, but because I stopped giving him what he'd always taken for granted. Access. Here's what most people don't realize. When someone disrespects you repeatedly, it's because they've calculated the risk. They assume you'll still show up, still answer the phone, still smile at their passive-aggressive jokes. That's not forgiveness, that's conditioning. But when you remove your time, your attention, your warmth, they don't know what to do with the emptiness you leave behind. It rattles them, because silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's a mirror. And in it, they see themselves, raw, unfiltered, and without your energy to mask their reflection. Stoic philosophy teaches us that we don't control what others do, but we can master our reaction. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." And sometimes being unlike him means vanishing, not with noise, but with a stillness that speaks louder than confrontation ever could. This isn't passive, this is precision, this is choosing dignity over dramatics. When you stop explaining yourself, when you don't return the text, when you suddenly aren't available anymore, the silence grows heavy. They may brush it off at first. "You're just busy," they'll say. But as days turn to weeks and their phone remains dry, it begins to gnaw at them. Not because they miss you, but because they don't understand why you're no longer orbiting their world. That's the regret. Not love, not remorse. Just the shocking realization that they've lost the power to summon you at will. And here's the part they never prepare for. When you step away and guard your peace, something inside you shifts. You start sleeping better, smiling more. Your energy returns, not because life got easier, but because their presence isn't draining you anymore. You don't owe anyone an announcement when you choose self-respect. You just owe yourself the silence needed to heal. So, if you've ever felt the need to explain your distance, don't. The people who respected you never put you in a position to choose between your peace and their approval. And the ones who did, let the sound of nothing echo until they realized that losing you wasn't loud. It was silent, strategic, and final. In the next section, we'll explore how silence is not just a weapon of distance, but a tool of transformation. Because the moment you stop giving explanations is the moment you start reclaiming your life. Silent self-improvement and leveling up. There's a quiet kind of power that doesn't announce itself, and yet, when it arrives, it changes everything. It doesn't come with noise or drama. It comes with stillness, with discipline, with choices made in private and progress tracked in silence. Modern psychology confirms that when you speak less about your goals and simply work on them, your brain preserves energy for action instead of performance. That's why people who level up silently often grow faster and more sustainably. They're not seeking permission. They're not seeking applause. They're building, quietly, strategically, alone. This kind of transformation unsettles people, especially those who once disrespected you, because the moment you stop explaining yourself, stop reacting, stop playing their emotional games, you take away the one thing they relied on, your attention. They fed off your emotional availability. They needed your responses, your justifications, your energy. But silence? Silence is different. Silence forces them to face themselves, and that, for many, is unbearable. What you're doing isn't avoidance, it's ascension. You are no longer arguing to be understood. You are no longer trying to fix their image of you. You're busy repairing the relationship that matters most, the one between you and your peace. While they're still stuck in the same cycles, repeating the same conversations, gossiping in the same rooms, you're somewhere else entirely. Mentally removed, emotionally detached, spiritually focused. And it shows. You're not replying the way you used to. You don't attend every argument you're invited to. You don't post your progress, and you don't chase recognition. And because of that, people start to notice. They don't see the blueprint, but they sense the shift. They feel the absence of your validation, the space where your energy used to be, and it makes them uncomfortable. Not because you've attacked them, but because your detachment has made their control irrelevant. This is where Stoicism enters, not as a cold philosophy, but as a shield. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. And this is what you've claimed. Power over your reactions, power over your time, power over your energy. You've stopped letting external chaos dictate your internal peace. That is what makes Stoicism so radical in a world addicted to noise. When you grow in silence, you stop performing for people who don't matter. And when you stop performing, you start living with integrity. The mistake people make is thinking success requires witnesses, that your growth isn't real until it's seen, that revenge needs to be loud to be satisfying. But the truth is, real evolution is subtle. It's in the quiet mornings when you choose discipline over comfort. It's in the nights you decide to read instead of argue. It's in the way you walk into a room with peace rather than tension. And the people who once disrespected you? They notice. They may not say it, but they feel it. It might be in a conversation they overhear, a photo they stumble upon, or just the calm in your presence that wasn't there before, and suddenly their disrespect doesn't echo the same way. It falls flat, because you're not playing that role anymore. You're not the person they underestimated. You've outgrown the script. This is the quiet kind of revenge. Not petty, not angry, just steady, focused, unshakable growth. And what makes it so powerful is that it wasn't about them to begin with. You didn't rise to prove them wrong. You rose because you remembered who you were before they tried to break you. And now, you don't need to explain a thing. Your peace is your proof. Your silence is your story. Your glow is your answer. In the next section, we'll go deeper into how to sustain this transformation, not just for a season, but for life. Because once you've tasted the power of quiet evolution, you never go back. Emotional control and remaining calm. Disrespect isn't just offensive, it's strategic. People who throw jabs, interrupt you, roll their eyes, or question your value aren't always careless. Many do it deliberately. They're testing you. They want to see if you'll crack, if you'll lash out, stumble over your words, defend yourself like someone desperate to be seen. Because the moment you do, they gain what they came for. Control. Not over the facts, over you. That's why staying calm in the face of disrespect is more than a coping skill. It's a weapon, a quiet, lethal weapon that dismantles their entire tactic without a single raised voice. It's not suppression, it's precision. A form of discipline that says, I'm not available for this chaos. Stoic philosophy teaches that the true battlefield is within. You're not meant to control others, you're meant to master your response. The moment you understand this, everything changes. When you hold your composure, especially when someone tries to provoke you, you're not just avoiding conflict. You're exposing a deeper truth. They don't control you. They never did. This creates confusion, even discomfort, in the person who disrespected you, because now they're left to wrestle with the absence of reaction. Without your emotional eruption to justify their own behavior, they're forced to sit with it, undistracted. Their behavior is no longer a game. It's a mirror, one they didn't expect to face. And that, for many, is where the regret begins. Not because you punished them, but because you didn't give them the chaos they thrive on. People who disrespect others often feed off drama. They want tension. They rely on you matching their energy so they can frame you as the unstable one. But when you respond with stillness, measured words, or none at all, you shift the ground beneath their feet. You don't just de-escalate the situation, you elevate yourself entirely out of the arena. And from that position, you protect the only thing truly worth guarding, your peace. This is why composure is often mistaken for indifference. But it's not. It's conviction. It's the deep knowledge that your worth isn't on trial. You're not performing for their approval. You're not auditioning for their respect. You're operating from self-possession, where their opinions hold no stake in your emotional state. And that detachment, that quiet refusal to entertain dysfunction, it's not passive, it's surgical. You cut through noise without ever lifting your voice. This isn't easy, especially as we age. The older we get, the more clearly we see the patterns. Disrespect often comes not from strangers, but from those who know where our wounds live. Family, co-workers, even long-time acquaintances. They know the tone that rattles you, the memory that triggers you, the weakness you used to carry. And yet, when you respond with grounded calm, not coldness but command, you rob them of the reaction they once depended on. They begin to realize the version of you they're trying to provoke is gone. And that realization is haunting. Stoicism teaches us to accept what we cannot control and focus wholly on what we can. Our thoughts, our choices, our response. Remaining calm in the face of provocation isn't avoidance. It's the highest form of personal power. You don't need to shout to prove you're strong. You don't need to argue to prove you're right. The absence of reaction is the reaction. It creates an emotional vacuum. And in that vacuum, your silence says more than any insult ever could. You are not significant enough to shake me. The beauty of this approach is that it not only neutralizes the disrespect, it elevates your self-worth. You begin to reclaim all the energy you once wasted on arguments, defenses, and endless explanations. That energy returns home. It becomes stillness, clarity, and focus. And as your peace grows, so does your presence. In the next part, we'll explore what it means to build boundaries without burning bridges, because you don't need to destroy someone to walk away. Sometimes the most powerful exit is one they barely hear, just the sound of you choosing yourself and never looking back. Setting boundaries without conflict. One of the most overlooked forms of wisdom is this: the ability to set boundaries without feeling the need to explain them. Psychologists have long observed that people who feel compelled to over-explain are often conditioned by past experiences, times when their voice wasn't enough, when their no had to come with a justification. But the truth is, once you reach a certain level of self-respect, justification becomes unnecessary. You stop needing others to understand why you're unavailable, why you no longer tolerate being overlooked, disrespected, or emotionally drained. You don't send lengthy messages, you don't give warnings. You simply shift, and that shift is where your power begins. It's a quiet transition. You start declining invitations that always came with guilt. You stop picking up the phone when someone who only calls in crisis rings again. You stop responding to sarcasm with politeness, to manipulation with patience. Not because you've become bitter, but because you've become clear. Boundaries aren't bricks, they're signals. They say, I value my peace enough to stop entertaining chaos. But that clarity, it disturbs the people who once benefited from your confusion. When you stop over-explaining and start honoring your limits with action, the dynamic flips. You're no longer seeking approval. You're no longer asking to be seen. You're simply unavailable for mistreatment. And for those who disrespected your kindness, who underestimated your silence, that's where regret starts to sink in. They didn't expect you to go quiet. They didn't expect you to step back with grace instead of noise. They didn't expect to be locked out without a scene. But Stoicism reminds us, true power lies not in reaction, but in restraint. You don't owe people access to you just because they've grown used to it. You don't owe them the old version of you, the one that explained, tolerated, and kept giving second chances. That version served a purpose. But the moment you begin living by your boundaries instead of broadcasting them, everything changes. This doesn't happen overnight. At first, people might test you. They might play the same old games, pretend not to notice your distance, make jokes to bait your response. But when you don't flinch, when your behavior stays consistent and calm, they begin to feel something deeper than confusion, powerlessness. Not because you said anything cruel, not because you retaliated, but because they realize they've lost the emotional influence they once held. That gap, the one between who you were and who you've become, becomes their reckoning. And the more they sit in your silence, the more they reflect on how they mishandled your presence. Choosing not to retaliate isn't weakness, it's intelligence, it's maturity. It's recognizing that revenge might satisfy your ego, but growth feeds your soul. The moment you stop trying to prove your value to people who refuse to honor it, you set yourself free. And here's the fascinating fact. Neurologically, the brain responds to unresolved tension by trying to find closure. When you walk away without giving them that closure, without offering a fight, you force them to wrestle with their own conscience. That discomfort, that's karma doing its quiet work. While they stay tangled in their own web of excuses and patterns, you rise, not loudly, not in performance, but in presence. You start showing up differently. You protect your time. You invest in yourself. You find fulfillment in spaces where you don't have to shrink to be loved. And without realizing it, your peace becomes your loudest response. No confrontation, no revenge, just distance, clarity, and dignity. Eventually, they remember how generous you used to be, how forgiving, how endlessly available. And now, they feel the absence like a weight, not because you punished them, but because you finally chose yourself. In the next part, we'll explore how detaching from old roles allows you to redefine not only your relationships, but the story you tell yourself about who you are. Because growth isn't just about who you leave behind. It's about who you finally become. Walking away with dignity. Sometimes the most profound act of self-respect isn't in confrontation, retaliation, or giving someone a piece of your mind. It's simply in disappearing. Not because you've lost, not because you've run away, but because you finally recognized that your presence was being wasted on someone who never valued it. And when you leave without a word, without a scene, without even a goodbye, the silence you leave behind does what no amount of speaking could ever accomplish. It echoes, it unsettles, it teaches, and it hurts in all the right places. They expected you to stay. That's the truth. They expected your patience to stretch indefinitely. They grew comfortable with the sound of your forgiveness, with your time, your loyalty, your generosity. They banked on your predictability, the way you always showed up, the way you always explained even when it wasn't your fault. But what they never prepared for was your absence. Because that's the part that breaks them, not the loss of the argument, but the loss of access. I once watched a woman in her 70s walk away from a 20-year friendship, not with bitterness, not with accusations, but with something colder, quieter, detachment. Her friend had become dismissive, jealous, subtle with her digs, and constant in taking but never giving. For years, this woman had tried to keep the connection alive, remembering birthdays, showing up for hospital visits, biting her tongue in every conversation. Until one day she simply stopped. No final conversation, no warnings. She sent no card that year, didn't return the last phone call. And when asked, she smiled gently and said, "I just ran out of space for one-sided relationships." It wasn't dramatic, but it was final. The friend, confused, then offended, then hurt. But the woman, lighter, like a burden had quietly fallen from her shoulders and turned to dust. That's what disappearing with dignity looks like. It's not punishment, it's preservation. When someone repeatedly disrespects you, they're testing your threshold. They want to know how much of yourself you're willing to sacrifice for the illusion of connection. But when you reach the point where your energy no longer bends for their comfort, when you walk away without giving them the satisfaction of your anger, you take back everything they thought they owned. There is no closure to offer those who ignored your worth when it was right in front of them. And the beauty is, you don't need it anymore. Stoicism teaches that peace isn't found in external validation, but in internal alignment. When your values and actions finally line up, when your inner world stops begging your outer world to behave, you gain a calm that no apology can give you. That calm is what people remember and regret. People like to fill silence with stories. When you vanish from someone's life without explanation, without that one last emotional exchange, they're left with only their behavior to review. No argument to dissect. No rebuttal to frame themselves as the victim. Just themselves, their actions, and the vacuum you left behind. That void becomes the teacher they never expected. And they start to realize, your presence wasn't an obligation, it was a privilege. You didn't leave to hurt them. You left because you refused to keep hurting yourself. Because there comes a moment when you realize the most powerful boundary is the one you don't announce. You just live it. And the absence becomes your answer. The distance becomes your defense. And your silence becomes your statement. When someone disrespects you, your loyalty, your time, your silence, they expect a reaction, a storm, a speech, maybe even a final, "You'll regret this" moment. But here's the secret. The move that haunts them most is the one where you say nothing and leave. No drama, no warning, just a quiet exit dripping in dignity. And that silence, it lingers. It echoes in rooms you used to light up, in calls that go unanswered, in the version of you they thought would never walk away. That's the kind of regret they don't post about. But trust me, they feel it. So if you're tired of being the one who explains, defends, and forgives too easily, maybe it's time to stop showing up for people who never showed up for you. Let your distance do the talking. Let your glow-up be the punctuation. And let your peace remind them of everything they lost. If this video reminded you of your power, like it. If you've ever walked away in silence, drop a comment. They'll feel it. And subscribe for more unapologetic wisdom, because around here, we don't chase closure, we create consequences.